What we're seeing in the economy is a lack of restraint. It's frenzied and out of control. And what I saw is that we needed to go back to the fundamentals of family, of community, of faith that normally keep economy in balance. That's what Return to Order is all about. It's a book about the future. We look at the present economic crisis and then we propose real solutions based on timeless principles.
If you give this book a chance, it can affect your life in profound ways on a daily basis, and it can affect you for the rest of your life without a doubt.
Initially I thought, oh, a book on the economy. It's not about stocks and bonds, it's not about IRAs, it's not about any of that. It's more about the economy of the soul and how the economy can and should feed the soul, more so even than the body.
It's probably the best analysis that I have ever seen on our entire society, our entire culture.
Every time I read it, I get a little bit emotional. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
What I want the readers of the book to do is to enter into the debate about the future of our country, to take the arguments of the book and to use them against those who would propose a socialist agenda as an economic solution, and to point in the direction of a Christian organic society as a valid alternative that we can bring to the table. I started studying these subjects, actually it was back in 1986. Professor Plinio-Correa got together a group of us and said, well, why don't you study these American topics? He sort of sensed that the American economy was going to go down and go into great crisis, and that we should study Christian organic society as a remedy, as a Catholic response to this whole problem. And so he encouraged us to study economy, American society, problems of the Industrial Revolution. And over the last, let's say, 6 or 7 years, we began a very, very intensive effort. We would get together 2 or 3 times a week. Very informal meetings. Everyone could talk and give his opinion. One would say one thing, another would say, no, that's wrong. It was sort of a free-for-all. We bring what we've studied, the books that we've read, and in this atmosphere of camaraderie and a lot of very intense discussion, we put together the arguments that you'll find in Return to Order. We wanted to present these solutions that we need, especially in our days. There's a term in the book that we call frenetic intemperance. Frenetic intemperance describes that lack of control that has turned our economy into a credit card economy, where everyone wants everything instantly, regardless of the consequences.
There's a fellow who's just an acquaintance, he's in his 20s, unemployed, not rich. Some people unemployed are rich, not rich. Every year he buys a new iPad. Why does he buy a new iPad? Because they come out with a new iPad. He's got to have the newest iPad. Does he need it? I don't think so. But he thinks he does. It doesn't really matter because he's decided when it comes out, he's going to get in line and he's going to be one of the first to get it. There's more than a small amount of frenetic intemperance there. Now, if that young man instead had perhaps focused on something a little different, maybe other things in his life would get straightened out too. We don't really know the answer to that, but I can be sure as long as they come out with an iPad every year, this fellow's lined up, and if he has the money or not, he's going to find a way to acquire an iPad.
Black Friday is a typical example of frenetic intemperance. You have that frenzied desire to throw off restraints, to have it now, to have it instantly. I mean, this is something that goes very deep down in the soul. And unless we address this particular problem, we're not going to resolve our financial crisis. That's why, for example, the average American consumer has 13 credit obligations. And that's why each American would need $50,000 to pay off his share of the federal deficit. Just the sheer numbers should be enough to convince us the crisis is real. We're talking in terms of trillions of dollars, which have no proportion to our daily lives. And this is something that is increasing exponentially. Another reason why the crisis is real is because frenetic intemperance continues unabated. In the 2008 crisis, we lost some $10 trillion, and it almost brought the system down. Now the same institutions are engaged in the same risky behavior, with derivative trades involving hundreds of trillions of dollars.
The economic crisis is related to the moral decline to the extent that people, when engaging in their economic affairs, put aside their moral problems with things and decide just to go for whatever gives them the greatest amount of money.
The economy isn't the problem. It is a symptom of the problem, and I think the great thing about Return to Order is that right at the very beginning, it not only examines where we've been and how we've gotten to where we are, but it looks at the economy and suggests how to fix it.
The overall collapse of our morals as a people, as a nation, and as a world is laying the balance of the basis for a collapse of our economy as well. The one leads to the other. When our morals fall apart, our basis for thinking, doing, and acting also begins to collapse.
If you don't know what the real problem is, we can fix our economy. We can attempt to fix our economy. And I think we're never going to fix it until we get to the real problem. And the real problem, of course, is simply that we have lost the values of Western civilization. We've lost those ethics, and we've lost all of those things which ultimately play into an economy. And Return to Order addresses the problem and the situation in a way that I personally feel no one has ever done before. It is a book for all seasons. Seriously, it's the sort of thing that I think anybody is going to get something out of it, honest to God.
It's a very compelling book. It's a book that once you open it up and start reading, you cannot put it down. It's one that you page through, page after page, paragraph after paragraph, trying to see where the book is ultimately going to take you in the process.
Whether you're a historian or an economist or a businessman or a preacher or a car mechanic, if you give this book a chance, it can affect your life in profound ways on a daily basis, and it can affect you for the rest of your life without a doubt. And hopefully that would resound through the people that are reading it, and it would affect neighborhoods and families, and this would be a great book for families.
Chapter 51 is my favorite part of the book. Why? Because chapter 51 is not so much an analysis of what the problems are, but it points the way towards a solution. And as Americans, we Americans are practical folk. We like to see solutions when possible. Sometimes problems don't have solutions, but other times they do. And I can see how if somebody didn't have a chance to read chapter 51, they might come away rather discouraged. But chapter 51 is, I believe, probably the most important chapter in the book. And every time I read it, I get a little bit emotional. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
It's probably the best analysis that I have ever seen on our entire society, our entire culture, what's taking place in our world, not only in this country, but also in the world in general, how each aspect is connected together, and how these all aspects are all beginning to unravel one after the other, right before our eyes.
This book is a self-help book for every American who wants to not only save the economy, save America, but save his sanity as well. Who would think that a book on the economy would actually be dynamic? It sounds kind of boring to me. Initially I thought, oh, a book on the economy. It's not about stocks and bonds, it's not about IRAs, it's not about any of that. It's more about the economy of the soul and how the economy can and should feed the soul, more so even than the body.
An organic Christian solution is one that corresponds to the nature of men. It's full of natural leaderships and ties and solutions that are found in society and not imposed upon society. Organic Christian society proposes a set of just a few rules and then many, many applications, and that socialism is one that imposes one system and thousands of rules and regulations, because that's exactly what it does. We need just a few basic principles in society, and from that, the applications, innumerable applications. That is what Christian organic society is. It's a society where people are treated like living beings and not machines. It's rooted in community, place, and family. It's full of social ties and natural leaderships. And of course, it's inspired by Christian principles. It's a type of society that brings back the warmth that we need and the human element back into the economy. The example that immediately comes to mind is that of the family. It's an ideal school of temperance because it teaches its members about duty, responsibility, balanced consumption, balanced production. Nobody programs a family. No one says a family has to be exactly like this. All you have to do to form a family, a Christian family, is follow certain moral principles, and then they apply them to the concrete circumstances, to the children. One child has a certain aptitude, another child has a certain talent. They adapt those rules to the circumstances, and so they form a very organic way of being. It's not an imposed thing. It's not something that is rigid and mechanistic. And when the going gets tough, members unite around a common cause. This is the model we need for our society today, not that of a corporation, but that of the family. What we say in Return to Order is that honor is much, much more important than money, that character is much more than capital.
Our whole civilization started to go off into a strange and terrible world where all we really did think about was money. And when money ceased to be the median between the consumer and what they need, and money becomes the end, and this is described beautifully in the book, you're in trouble.
Well, there's a little vignette Mr. Horvat laid out there. He was in a part of the book where he was explaining the organic civilization and how important that is, and the concept's very abstract for us Americans. And he gave a little story. It was just a little story about a man, a craftsman in the Middle Ages, who wakes up from his humble cottage and takes a stroll early in the morning to his shop where he's going to perform his daily work. And along the way, he sees various types of birds. Maybe a rabbit scuttles across the path, butterflies, whatever, certain flowers, the flora and fauna of his region. And once he gets to his shop, and he's been refreshed by these images, he sits down to his potter's wheel or what have you, and he constructs an object that and impresses upon that object the impressions his region has made upon him. Therefore, his object becomes a manifestation of the whole culture in which he is immersed. That, to me, just gave a real, a reality, if you will, to the whole link between the producer and the product he makes.
What many people don't realize about the Middle Ages is that it was a period of tremendous economic and technological growth. There are some authors that say it was the first industrial revolution. And what makes it so attractive is that it was able to do this without taking out the human element in economy and without frenetic intemperance. When you think of pre-industrial production, you generally think of craftsmanship, pride in one's work, honesty. These are things that come to mind. It's that human element that's in economy.
But when we have industries where you're asking people to work 100 hours a week, and you look at where a medieval peasant was, 120 days a year, the rest, the seasons were either not good to work outside, there were feast days, there were holy days, there was celebration as well as solemnity.
The Middle Ages was the first advanced civilization in history that abolished slavery. They had a concern for the dignity of the human being.
I don't think most people understand or realize that there was a duality there, that we have a feeling that the Middle Ages were bad and ugly and severe. And 120 days a year versus 100 hours a week, no matter, regardless of how much money you're making. I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't want to return to the best of what that economic system has to offer, even if it doesn't give you 120 days a year as opposed to 100 hours a week. But you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that there's a terrible imbalance. The Middle Ages was something very, very different.
Not only did the Middle Ages have inventions and economic progress, but their technology was integrated into their lives, and as a result, they took into consideration the spiritual aspect of men. And so you had all the cathedrals and monuments and castles and works of art that even today, people from all over the world come to see. In a Christian organic society, technology serves man. Today, the opposite is true. Technology is everywhere. It dominates our lives. People are treated as numbers. It's your barcode. You swipe in your name. You're just simply a number in the system, and you're not treated as a living being, so to speak. We're on constant call. Everything must be instant. We're bombarded by emails and text messages. There's no balance anymore. Technology should serve man like a horse serves a rider. Today we've fallen off the horse with our foot in the stirrup and being dragged all about. We need to put technology back in its place. What we need is what sociologists call representative characters. These are the natural leaders of society. I mean, they're out there, they're the statesmen, teachers, religious, military, people who we look up to, people who are able to take the community needs and translate them into action. Those who sacrifice for the common good. Modern culture promotes unrepresentative characters, like Hollywood stars. We need to promote the opposite.
We need leaders to lead, but we also need people to follow. For them to do that, they've got to understand what's taking place, what they're being asked to do, what are they being faced with in life today. And this book does that in an excellent fashion.
In chapter 51, something I'd like to finish up with. In chapter 51, when you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's an appeal to those people in society, not just individuals who are going to change the way they live to root out frenetic intemperance in their personal lives, but to those people in society in leadership roles. They may be in government, they may be in the military, they may be in business, they may be in school, they may be in society, in the community, who in every step they take try to root this out and provide effective, powerful, inspirational leadership. To those people, we need to especially direct our thoughts. We need to especially pray for them, because they have the ability, they will have the ability to persuade many of their friends around them to aspire to a higher standard to overcome this problem we face today as a country. I can see this having an effect not only in an individual's life, but especially if those sectors in society who are called to lead take a look at this and apply this in their professional dealings. I can see this having a profound effect on the problems that we face as a country.
Organic Christian society is based on principles that are applicable to everyone. It comes from the very nature of man himself. They're valid for all times and all peoples. Now, religion does have its role, but let's face it, economy without order, temperance, or virtue, it's simply not going to work. The economy is breaking down, the Congress is gridlocked, the country is divided. We're being forced to look at solutions that point to honesty, sacrifice, integrity, that should be the heart and soul of any economy. Everyone's talking about going back to free markets, but nobody's talking about the source from which those markets came. No one's talking about that framework of order which gives the confidence and trust that make free markets possible. Return to Order talks about this.
It explains what we are seeing but didn't have the ability to put into words. It's explaining what's taking place in our lives but we did not understand. A book with a lot of challenges, a book that is very interesting to read, but also a book that is very disturbing to read. Because what is reflected in there is what is truly taking place, not what our media or our politicians or even some of our church leaders are saying that is taking place in our world today.
People who are right-thinking, God-fearing, God-loving Americans and who want the best for our country and don't like where it's been headed, when they see this result, they feel discouraged. And I think they have been targeted. I think they've been targeted by the enemy. The enemy wants them to be discouraged. The enemy wants them to feel like a dog that's been whipped and run off with its tail between its legs. And I say, once we recognize that, we need to say, all right, they want us to be discouraged. We will not be discouraged. How will we react then? We need to do the opposite of what they want us to do. We need to behave in a psychological sense, the way a Marine who's been shot in the arm reacts. He says, oh, my arm, it's hurting. No. He gets up and he takes after the enemy and he destroys the enemy, or the enemy destroys him, but he fights. So our attitude of soul, I believe, needs to be an attitude of a warrior, an attitude of heroism, an attitude of self-sacrifice. Even if we lose personally, we need to do this, always in a legal and peaceful way, but we need to do this and we need to fight back. And if we do that as a country, if we convince our compatriots to do that, I have no doubt that God will bless our endeavors and we will be victorious.